Welcome to the Hockey Writers Union Junction, a weekly show from our Columbus Blue Jackets insider, Mark Scheig, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, he covers everything that happens with the Jackets. So get ready. It's time for another get-together at Union Junction.
All right, welcome back to Union Junction after a week off with a game and a holiday. It's Mark and it's Nick back with you here. We got a lot to talk about. We've had guests the last few times out, and we really had a good conversation about the Blue Jackets, and this is a perfect opportunity to do that now. We've got 20 games in the books. We've got 2 full months in the books. So we're going to dedicate this whole show for you to talking about, what have we thought about these first 20 games? And what have we thought about their recent play? Is the sign of things to come, different things. So Nick's here along the ride. We're going to go for the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to get you all caught up and then hopefully even get you prepared for the Dallas game, which is going to come up 8:30 Eastern time tonight. So Nick, I know you've watched the last couple of games here, going back to the Vancouver game, which they ended up winning. Then the next night in St. Louis, they got pummeled, especially in the second period. And then the Blue Jackets decided, if we're going to get pummeled, let's get pummeled in the first period. And they lose 6-0 to Nashville and Philippe Forsberg's 4 goals. So my question for you to start out is, how concerned are you about these last 3 outings? They have the good record, but where is your level of concern based specifically on the last 3 outings?
Well, if we're looking at the last 3 outings in particular, I'm going to say I would of course be concerned looking at, those 3 games in a vacuum, but I got to say, look at the game right before that. They shut out the Winnipeg Jets, which, the Jets haven't been, their best versions of themselves, especially if you look at the last few years, but, they're still a very good team. Very good team. And I saw this stat. It made me laugh. You look at heading into that Nashville game, of all the games that the Blue Jackets have played in Nashville, they've played 50 all time. They've won 9. The rest were all losses. So, sometimes teams just go into an arena and for whatever reason, they're just snake bit. That was a tough game to watch. I'll be honest. I'm sure that you feel the same way. I'm sure if that Sillinger goal, or not Sillinger goal, but that Sillinger offside that led to a goal, if that wasn't overturned, would have been a little bit different of a game. But, they were still not off to a great start at that point. So little concern, but this is kind of what we expected heading into this year, isn't it, Mark?
It is what I expected, yes, but I'm very concerned. I'm not just a little bit concerned.
Really?
I am very concerned. Now, I'll tell you, I'll lay out my reasons and we'll see what you think of this. So a 12-8 start, nothing to sneeze at. For a team as young as they are, a lot of new pieces, a lot of moving parts, full credit to them. But my goodness, they are the youngest team in the league. You've got an 18-year-old second-line center who's still trying to adjust to the rigors of the league. And I can go up and down the lineup here as well. You have your veterans in spots, but I look at that defense. Zach Werenski is just 24. He's your best defenseman. Everyone else, I think, except for Gavrikov, might be younger. So you're saying, maybe you say you're a little bit concerned, but wow, you've got all those 20-something defensemen who are trying to learn. Adam Boqvist is still just 20 years old. I understand a lot of people came into this season, hoping for the development, not necessarily looking at the playoffs. But man, it's hard to ignore the last 3 games, because Vancouver happened, they got a win out of it. St. Louis happened, they had a bad period. Okay, things like that happen. This St. Louis is another building they have a lot of trouble in. Then you mentioned Nashville. They always, like you said, 9 wins in 50 games. Have trouble with Nashville. But man, there's a theme going on here. And for a young team, one of the hardest things to learn about the National Hockey League is just how hard it is to stop momentum and when it comes to games. And you clearly have a team that hasn't demonstrated that if they start to lose control, it gets way out of control. And my question is, how quickly can they get that back? How quickly can they learn to swing momentum back into their favor? So that's why I'm concerned. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree, but Mark, at the same time, you just wrote a piece about Boqvist and how the Blue Jackets are pretty confident in him. I mean, like, this is a guy, again, he's going to be a cornerstone of this defense. I mean, fingers crossed for the Blue Jackets. That's what they were betting on. But I guess why I don't see concern is because this is expected. I mean, it's 3 games. I mean, that's almost 5% of your season, but still, these setbacks are what cause teams to grow. I mean, you look at all the championship teams, especially the Lightning, what really led them to go over the hump was getting swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets. They really kicked it into high gear after that season. So this is definitely not of the same magnitude at all. But when you see those little setbacks, it's going to be how they deal with those setbacks that really determines how they are moving forward. And that does start from the top. So I'm going to ask you, Mark, what do you think about how Brad Larsen has handled this season? And do you think he'll be able to get them to bounce back?
You know what, Nick? So far, so good on the Larsen front. I think that there's an obvious difference to the way he handles things compared to Tortorella, which I think a lot of fans were certainly looking for. They wanted to see more offensive freedom, though they certainly gotten that. I mean, going into the Nashville game, they were the 6th ranked team in the NHL in goals for, like 3.4 goals a game. I don't think many people expected that, but I think that's in part due to Larsen's approach and letting their skilled guys be skilled guys and trying to put their players in the best position to succeed. I think there's still a lot more to learn about him, especially now that he's kind of dealing for the first time with, a little bit of a slump here where they've lost a couple in a row now where they haven't looked good at all. We're going to start to see how he handles things. I mean, he tried changing the lines. That first period in Nashville didn't work, so he reverted back. So we're going to start to learn much more about him, the tendencies of how's he going to handle certain things. So I think, as we get later on in the year, we'll start to get more of a sense of him. But so far in 20 games, I think he's done exceedingly well, given the expectations. What about you?
I would agree. I'd say that, they started off really strong. It seemed like they got the Torts is gone kind of bump. It's interesting, kind of like how I mentioned last week with maybe how Jack Eichel leaving Buffalo kind of gave them a bit of a bump. And it's interesting to see, Brandon Dubinsky's comments about, Tortorella. He was kind of anti-Torts, kind of more on the Larsen train. It's kind of all about that style of leadership now. We saw a reckoning with Mike Babcock getting booted. And, there was a lot of talk about other coaches and stuff that they had done. That was 2 seasons ago now. They were more of a authoritarian type leadership style. And the kind of overarching thing that I got from that whole reckoning was that, that style of leadership doesn't work with younger players anymore. This is a generation that was, to be frank, raised differently than, the previous generations of players. So I think Larsen's, kind of more laid back approach. I'm sure that he still, disciplines when he needs to and does what he needs to do. But his more laid back approach and letting guys kind of express themselves a little bit better, I think that's the coaching style for the future. So, he's still a young coach too. You got to remember that. But I think that he definitely seems like he's got them on the right track there for sure. At least I'm thinking.
I agree. Just coming, I think a lot of fans hated the hire at first, and they just pointed at one thing, which I thought was a little short-sighted. And they going into the Nashville game, they were near the top 10 in the league in power play percentage. So it's clear that the players respect him, and they're definitely willing to play for him. I think the story goes that a couple of guys really vouched for him to be the successor to Tortorella, and that should tell you everything you need to know about what they think of him and what they think that he could become. And yeah, everything that you said I think is absolutely true about him. He's got an opportunity now to really grow into the role, especially with some of these trials that are going to be coming up for the team. And, if it continues to go down like this, most people thought coming in that this was going to be a rough year. I mean, the whole coaching staff, talking about Larsen, if you're talking about Vincent, they haven't been NHL coaches before. They haven't been an NHL head coach before. So Larsen's jumping in, for the first time here. And there's a reason why management said no one was able to exceed the Lars bar, because he knows the Blue Jackets well. He knows what's expected. And you made a really good point earlier about so when he has to discipline, when he has to speak up. He can combine both, where he can be gentle on one hand and a player's coach, but he also demands a lot at the same time. But he's able to portray it in such a way that isn't too over the top or too rough. And I think that really bodes well for certain players to be able to respond. One thing I was looking at, I was wondering how a player like Jake Voracek would react to a first-time head coach. For someone who's been in the league for a very long time and is used to playing in big games, and now he's coming here to, what you want to call it, a rebuild or retool, whatever it is. And he's mixed in just fine. And I think Larsen has a lot to do with that, because they've set the environment there. And I think that's something that is only going to get better in time with him. Definitely going to be a little bit rough coming up here, but I think that the Blue Jackets, at least so far, have proven that they've made the right decision when it comes to the head coach.
Yeah. So let's dig a bit into the roster here, Mark.
Yeah.
What I would say is probably the hottest button topic. I've seen a lot of Blue Jackets forums blow up over this. Let's get into the goaltending.
Oh boy.
Mark, I mean, Joonas Korpisalo has an .885 save percentage. Elvis Merzlikins has a .923. Korpisalo's got a 3.95 goals against average. Merzlikins a 2.61. Let me ask you, let's just start off. Is Merzlikins this much better, or is the team playing differently in front of him than Korpisalo?
I wrote about this recently to a degree, and I actually think the answer to that is a little bit of both, Nick. Yeah, it was interesting when I wrote the article that I did, kind of checking in on the goalies. It was one of the recent news and rumors that we did. We looked at the goalies and said, okay, we know the numbers, that, like you just said, with the goals against and the save percentage, it's obvious who's better. But it always requires a little bit of further digging when it comes to, okay, well, why is that? Is the team playing differently? Is there something really going on? Is Korpisalo just not making saves? Well, it turns out both are true. Whichever metric you want to use, if you want to look at expected goals, Merzlikins is performing better. You want to look at GSAA, goals saved above average, Merzlikins is performing better. He's saving more goals than expected. Korpisalo is not. So on those fronts, yes, Merzlikins is doing better. But there is one stat that definitely jumped out at me when I took a look, and it was rush chances against. And it was almost 2-1. Korpisalo saw more rush chances against than Merzlikins. Now, that doesn't explain everything, but it certainly gives a little bit of a hint that perhaps maybe the defense isn't playing as solidly in front of Korpisalo. Korpisalo has to face more high danger chances. Turns out that the expected goals, though, is in terms of what they see in a particular game, is around the same for both. So that's why you have to kind of look at everything. But it's still interesting to note that, yeah, I do think that there is a little bit of an element of the Blue Jackets, I think, are playing a little bit looser. Now, they're able to score goals, but they give them up in bunches as well. And if they score 3.4, they give up, 3.2, 3.3. It's actually pretty similar. So that's a sign that the defense isn't quite there as much. It means the goaltending has to do more. So in that sense, Merzlikins has certainly proven so far that he's performed better, and he seems to be the number one goaltender, even though he personally admitted the other night against Vancouver after the game, they still didn't feel like a number one because he's not in that groove of sorts yet. Like he's gotten the majority of the starts, but he doesn't feel like that he's a true number one. So it's an interesting dynamic there. I think we can even go a lot farther into it if we wanted to. But Nick, what do you think? Do you think that the numbers just speak for themselves?
Yes and no. I do agree. Yeah, it does seem like it's a bit of both. Korpisalo hasn't quite had the bounce back that a lot of fans were hoping for, but at the same time, the team does look a little bit different in front of Korpisalo than Merzlikins. I don't know if it's kind of Elvis's confidence that kind of irradiates out from the crease a little bit. But yeah, they do look a bit different, especially when it comes to those pressure situations, I would say. Anyways,
now I got a question for you real quick.
Yeah,
since
sure.
we're on the
Go ahead.
topic of Korpisalo, and I think this will push a lot of fans' buttons if you want to talk about groups and stuff. Did the Blue Jackets make a mistake not trading him in the offseason?
Well, if I was Jarmo Kekalainen, I probably would have traded him a couple seasons ago when his value was at the highest, right after that little playoff series there. I know that they were very hopeful that, he would turn into that number one guy. But I mean, his value was never higher than after that 80 something save performance, right? So, it's tough. And if they knew in the offseason 100% that they were going to go with Merzlikins, then they probably should have let Korpisalo go, I think. They were hoping for a little bit of a bump, a bit more of a bounce back so they could maybe get that trade value up. But, as things are looking right now, I hate to say it, but I don't really see many suitors. Do you see many teams knocking at the door?
I do. And I think that it's a developing market, Nick, because, right, you have injuries that happen. You have situations that are changing. Heck, Matt Murray was just waived from Ottawa. Buffalo's in the market for a goalie. Mike Smith's situation in Edmonton is worth monitoring. You can never have enough good goaltending. But the concern here is everyone looks at Korpisalo's numbers, and they're not that great. You mentioned 885 save percentage. Who's going to want to trade for that now? Well, if you look at Edmonton's situation, what are they? Cup or bust, right? The way that they're going, one of the top teams in the league. Is Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith, and whenever he gets back, and then Stuart Skinner's in now. Does that bode confidence if you're an Oilers fan? Well, I'm not sure.
Well, Koskinen's been playing pretty well lately. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, well, playoffs are a much different animal, though.
That's true.
And Korpisalo's proven, as you said, the 80 save performance. He beat Toronto, or helped beat Toronto, him and Merzlikins both in the bubble. Maybe you put him in front of a more stout defensive team. You get him in so I think that there are suitors out there depending on fit and need.
Yeah, that's true.
I like Buffalo. I'm not sure he would succeed in Buffalo all that well. He's a pending UFA. I'm not sure why the Sabres would trade for a pending UFA at this point unless they know he's signing.
Well, that's the other thing, Mark, is that, are these numbers really inspiring you to go out and rent this guy?
Well, that's just it, right? That's the question teams are going to have to find out, because he's proven that he can be better, but he's also on a team that clearly has some defensive deficiencies and is clearly showing. And that's what the team analytic departments are going to have to figure out is, would a change of scenery benefit him, and would he perform better in front of a behind of a defensive team? I personally think so. I don't know if Kekalainen will be able to get the value that he wants on a trade now. The reports that he was looking for a first round pick. I'm not sure how you're doing that now, but
yeah.
And they might even elect to keep him, kind of as a self rental. If the numbers that you can't find a trade, they'll maybe not the most ideal situation, but it's something that he's clearly proven that he's willing to do, is keep somebody. Artemi Panarin.
Yeah, well, yeah. Too soon, Mark. Too soon.
Too soon. I know. But
well, the other thing is, Mark, I mean, like you mentioned, this team up until, that Nashville game was in a playoff spot.
Yep.
So it's really going to depend on, where they're at in terms of standings when it comes to that deadline.
Oh,
but
sure.
let's move up the lineup a little bit. Let's talk about the defense.
Real quick before you do the lineup.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let's just remind fans here. This is not the only show that we have here at the Hockey Writers. We have Union Junction here, the Blue Jackets. And I can go down the list. We have Sabres, Red Wings, Blackhawks, Kraken, Coyotes, and I know I'm missing a couple. And if I'm missing your show, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm not sorry about it, but the Hockey Writers Network has a ton of shows. And if you make sure you hit subscribe and like, you'll catch our show. You'll catch all the shows that come out. We have a news and rumor show. That way, if you need something to listen to, you want a little bit of different variety, we have that for you. And another thing too, we have a newsletter that comes out every morning now. It's called the Morning Skate. Make sure you check that out and sign up. You'll get some really cool stories delivered to your inbox every morning. So a lot of things going on here at the Hockey Writers. Always got something going on. So just make sure you are not missing out. Make sure you sign up for the Morning Skate and subscribe to all of our great shows here on our network. All right, good, Nick.
Good stuff. It's good stuff, Mark.
It is.
It's good content, quality
Absolutely.
content
Quality
from
content.
people who really care about the game.
That's just it.
It's mostly driven by fandom.
It is, really.
We're not the largest budget organization, if I can be frank. This is all passion projects for all these people. So it's all good content. So now let's move up the lineup, Mark. Finally, since you'll allow me, let's move up to the defense. Let's talk about this. Are there any surprises for you on this decor?
There's a couple. So if you want to talk about pure surprises, for me anyway, Gavin Bayreuther has been a very pleasant surprise. He's been able to stay in the lineup and over the course of a few games, I think he's earned the opportunity to play in the bottom six. He hasn't really been knocked out yet. We'll see what happens as these games go on. But as somebody who came in as I think the 10th or 11th guy, for him to be able to get into the six like that and be able to hold it for a little bit of time, that's a pretty good performance in my opinion. I think Andrew Peeke has showed well at times. There's been some struggles there, but I can definitely see where he's improved, especially on the physical end of things. Seems like a much different player. I see confidence growing out of his game. And I knew that once he was given a chance, I figured something was going to happen, but it's still been a very nice, pleasant surprise to see Jake Bean at least thrive at points in the early going as well. What about you?
Well, Bayreuther, I think, Seattle Kraken legend.
Oh, the legend. Yes.
He was a great, I expect to see his number in the rafters one day. That was definitely a guy who jumped out at me. It's nice to see him, kind of get a shot after a lot of people were like, who's this guy? Who did they take from our team?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he was definitely good. I have really enjoyed watching Boqvist the last few games, of course.
Yep.
He is as advertised. You can see that the wheels are always turning in his mind when he's got the puck. Mm-hmm. But again, as advertised, a little bit deficient away from the puck. But again, he's 21 years old. Yep. This, most defensemen aren't even in the league by now. So it's great to see him getting that ice time and kind of thriving with it. And the other big one is Werenski. You can't talk about the decor and not talk about this guy. He stepped up. Mm-hmm. He really has. I mean, you look at his production. He's at 15 points through 20 games. That's stellar production. He's ahead of Seth Jones. At least the last that I looked, he was ahead of Seth Jones production wise. And that, that's got to make Blue Jackets fans feel at least a little bit good about, who they picked. I don't know. What do you think about how Werenski's played this year?
He's been good. I expected him to be good, as I always had held the belief that he's been a really good defenseman who's lived a little bit into the shadow of Jones, and for him to be able to come out like this, he's played with Bean, he's played with Boqvist. So he's proven a little bit of versatility playing with a couple different guys like that. He's been very much a joy to watch. I think he's doing a better job of, he came in the league as a purely offensive defenseman, and it was an adjustment for him to be able to incorporate the other side of the game. And I think we actually talked with him pre the Vancouver game, and we talked specifically about Boqvist, how Boqvist now is where Werenski was then, in terms of the offensive game being the strength of their game, and then trying to learn the other side. And Werenski gave a really good money quote about Boqvist, and he said this. He said, "I think he's ahead of where I was at the same time," meaning that he feels like Boqvist is a little bit more established defensively than Werenski was when he first started out. And I think that that's a really, really telling quote from somebody who's been through that process of learning, knowing that, this Boqvist kid could be very, very special. We already know the offense, but, he's picking up the defense, and I didn't put this in the recent piece, but he actually came up with a really funny quote Boqvist did. He said, if you're looking to play defense against Connor McDavid, you probably don't want me out there. And he said that just with a straight face. So we all just laughed, but he's made the point is you have to play smart. And that's the thing that he's trying to learn, is using your stick and using your skates to your advantage. And, and being able to learn from somebody like Werenski, who went through a similar path, I think is going to be beneficial for Boqvist. And I think it's beneficial for Werenski as well. I think that, they're going to grow together, and, these are going to be your cornerstone pieces of this defense. Not bad for the Seth Jones trade, eh?
Yeah, really, really not bad, especially when you move up front and you see how Cole Sillinger is already providing some returns. Mark,
yep.
Sillinger was drafted 12th. He's the only guy left in the league from this year's draft. Isn't that wild?
It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Especially for a Blue Jackets pick, like you've mentioned before, Kekalainen's never had an 18-year-old on his roster before. So definitely, and he wasn't even the first guy that the Blue Jackets drafted, So definitely big returns from that Seth Jones trade so far.
And it's not done yet.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it's not done yet. I mean, they still have the first round, Chicago's first rounder next year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bean too, who they swapped that second round pick for.
Absolutely.
So, wow, Kekalainen really fleeced now former general manager Stan Bowman.
Sure.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is the one pressing question that I have about the forward core of the Blue Jackets.
Okay.
Patrik Laine's out. When Patrik Laine comes back, who is out of that forward core?
Hoffman was scratched from the Nashville game. I know that by Larsen's own admission, that's not necessarily performance basis. He had to make a very tough decision. So you could say Hoffman for now, because he's kind of the one that's been out. You could say Danforth, at some point, because you have Bemstrom's going to be coming back soon, Laine coming back soon. A couple guys are probably going to have to go. So I think that, at least for now, those seem to be the two obvious names. But I'm going to maybe throw some of you off with this other one if it gets to that point. And you've seen him in Cleveland a couple of times when there wasn't room for him in the lineup early on, and that would be Igor Chinakhov. Look, he's had an okay start to the year. He obviously hasn't scored maybe as much, but it's pretty clear he's adjusting and stuff. He's still doing some okay things. But again, there's going to come a time where when everybody's back and healthy, they're going to have to make a really tough choice. The first person you're going to look at is someone who doesn't need waivers. And being able to send Chinakhov back and forth to Cleveland is going to possibly work out to their advantage. So in order, I would say Danforth, Hoffman, maybe one or two other players on the roster, but then also don't be surprised if Chinakhov possibly gets involved with that. What do you say, Nick?
I honestly, I was thinking Chinikov would probably be a little bit higher on my list because, when you look at how an NHL roster is made up, he's going to be in that bottom six, right? And do you want Igor Chinikov in your bottom six? He's over like a Justin Danforth, who's more one of those grittier guys. And do you want Chinikov getting those top 6 minutes in Cleveland? So, I think in that regard, it's kind of a win-win. It obviously would suck for the kid. I'm sure it would hurt his morale a little bit to get sent down there. But, long term, getting that action, getting those minutes, would it actually be a little bit better for him to go spend some more time down there?
Well, he's done some good things, though. Even though he hasn't really hit the score sheet as much, you look at the passing, you look at some of his positioning, like the kid can play.
Yeah, there's no regarding or no disputing that.
Yeah, it's just now, what's going to ultimately be better? Is it better to go back and get a little bit of development? I think I agree with that. But yeah, he's been playing some, depending on how you define the line, some top 6 minutes up there, with Voracek and Sillinger when they've been together. It's kind of been their de facto second line. So if he's getting top 6 minutes there against tougher competition, I could see both sides of that argument for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about somebody else. This is pretty cool to see so far. Let me ask, I'm going to start outlandish with you, Mark. Does Boone Jenner hit 40 goals this year?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Where do you think he tops out?
Well, he had 30 the 1 year. His shooting percentage was very high for what he is used to doing. So I didn't quite expect him to keep up the pace. Like, he's going to get a few goals here or there, but to say 40, I think is, that's the pace he's on, right? We're talking about quarter of the season. He's at 10 goals. I just don't see him doing 10 goals per quarter. But if you're asking me for a number, 25 is not out of the question.
Okay.
What about you?
I think he'll top a little higher than that. I think he might actually touch 30, especially if he keeps getting that top line, that top line minutes. After he was named captain, has he really stepped up? Because I think there's been a bit of a jump there, eh?
Oh, there's no question. There's been a bit of a jump. It's something that he's always wanted. I think that for where the team is right now, he's the perfect representative for what the Blue Jackets are all about, because he's a natural born leader. He leads by example. Such a young team needs somebody like him to be able to look up to. So I think he's fitting the role perfectly, but he's also learning at the same time, just kind of like everybody else on this team, just learning at what they're doing here. So he's learning the rigors of being an NHL captain, but has he stepped up? There's no question about it. He jumped up to the role of number 1 center. How many people out there prior to the season thought that he would not only do that, but admirably do that? He leads the team in goals, and he's making an impact on special teams as well. So no question in my mind. And that is going to kind of lead me to my next question to you, which could involve Jenner, maybe Voracek, depending on how you think of it. Who's been their best forward to date this season?
Oh geez, Mark, I'm gonna stick with my preseason prediction, which was a bit of a hot take then, and I don't think it is much of a hot take now. I'm gonna say Max Domi, and I know it's so weird to like when he was hurt, and they still got on without him, but when he's in that lineup, you can really tell. I think he's really effective. He's really bounced back this year from what was a tough season last year. Definitely close in second for me is probably Boone Jenner, just because he's effective in all situations. He's definitely a guy that you want on the ice at all times. But, there's been so many players that have just stepped up this year.
And you haven't even mentioned my MVP at all.
And
that's the point that I want to bring up, is that this player, I think, is still so underappreciated. Maybe not necessarily within the Blue Jackets fan base. I think most fans understand how good this player is, but especially out and around North America and around the world. This player, I think, is one of still the most underrated players in the entire National Hockey League, and he leads the Blue Jackets in points right now, and that is one Oliver Bjorkstrand. I tell you what, if you want to talk about my best forward at this point, given everything that he does in terms of being able to finish, being able to play defense, I would put Bjorkstrand slightly ahead of Jenner. Then I would slip in Voracek, Domi, and kind of into the next level there. But when you actually take a look at Bjorkstrand on tape and the different things that he can do, to the way that he can impact a game, teams have to account for him. He's one of the best finishers on the team outside of Patrik Laine, and he can dish the puck, but he's also really starting to really develop a two-way game. Like, he's a two-way force on this team. Just the overall combination, everything he brings on the table. For my money, he's been their best forward.
Yeah, that's so true. It's as soon as you started talking about somebody underappreciated, I was like, oh yeah, we're going Bjorky. And like we kind of look at the last offseason and have kind of seen the Keka plan, or whatever we're calling it. I mean, having Bjorkstrand signed for the next, I think, 5 years now, 4 years after this one, and he just re-signed Jenner at the same 3.7 for the next 4 years as well. Like, these are two really good players at a manageable hit, and that's, we're already seeing them perform well. And seeing them in mentorship roles with a lot of younger guys coming up is definitely going to be something to see, I think.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up. Got one more for you here, Nick, before we call it a podcast. And that is, let's look ahead a little bit here. So just maybe real quick, one or two of the storylines that you're going to be looking for in the near term for this Blue Jackets team.
I'm going to look to see about, I hate to really play into the trolls on Facebook, but that goalie battle that they have back there, to see if Korpisalo and the team in front of Korpisalo can kind of get a little bit more consistent there. And when we finally see Patrik Laine back, it's getting closer and closer, we hope. What is that forward core going to look like? Those are really the two big storylines for me. Mark, what do you think?
I've got two, and the first one is the one constant that I've seen in the struggles of the Blue Jackets so far has been they have really struggled against teams who can skate. And that would be the Blues, that would be the Predators, that would be Vancouver. Those are teams that all can skate. When they played Carolina earlier in the season, Carolina did pretty much whatever they wanted against them. And they've got some games upcoming here. They have to go to Edmonton. They have to go to Vancouver again. They have to go to Calgary, who's one of the best teams in the league here. I want to see how they start to adjust. The Blue Jackets can skate, but when someone can keep up with them or exceed what the Blue Jackets are doing, they've been pulverized. How did they adjust to that? What did they do to try to even that out some? I want to see how they do defensively, what kind of adjustments they make to maybe give their goaltenders a little bit of a better chance. I want to see what adjustments they make to what the obvious problem is. And then the other thing too, they haven't really played a lot of these sort of games yet this year because of the way the schedule works. They're in a big stretch against the West right now, but let's see them play against the Penguins. Let's see them play against the Capitals. Let's see them play against the Rangers, the Islanders, the Metro Division. They haven't even seen the Philadelphia Flyers yet. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of looking down on the team is, the Blue Jackets are going to win a few games here or there, but the Metro is so tough from top to bottom. They're one of the best divisions in all of hockey as a result. How will these Blue Jackets fare when they finally get to the meat of the schedule where they see these teams consistently that know the way they play? Are they able to keep up the early pace that they've been able to do, or is that the time where they start to fall? That's what we'll be watching for. Well, Nick, this has been a lot of fun. Seems 40 minutes goes by really quick when we're talking about these Blue Jackets because it's too bad there just isn't anything to talk about with them, right?
That's true.
But no, we always appreciate your time, Nick. Thank you for this. Fans, thank you for joining us here on the Union Junction. We really appreciate it. We will be back next week at this time with another episode. So until then, hope you have a really good night, and we will see you next time on Union Junction.